now, Channel 7 presents live from Sydney Harbour the 1986 Naval Review by His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, celebrating the 75th birthday of the Royal Australian Navy.
HMAS Perth, from which a 21-gun salute has begun, leads the flag review line comprising one ship from each of the 6 visiting countries participating. This is to be an historic Royal Australian Naval Review by Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, on board the reviewing ship HMAS Cook. The Duke is in fact listed as an Admiral of the fleet of the Royal Australian Navy. I'm John Lloyd Green with Naval Commodore Alan Robertson. Good afternoon, Alan.
Good afternoon, John. Good afternoon, everybody.
Welcoming you to this great occasion. Today, the Duke is accompanied by Chief of Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Michael Hudson. But let's now cross to Stuart Wagstaff and Naval Historian Commander Alan Evans aboard the reviewing vessel.
Thank you, John. Well, I'm here, as John said, aboard HMAS Cook, and with me is Commander Alan Evans, Naval Historian.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Alan. And a few moments ago, His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, boarded Cook at Pier 1, and we're now taking up position off the Opera House at Bennelong Point. From there, one ship from each of the 7 nations represented here on the harbour will sail past in saluting Prince Philip. The crews will be lining the deck and giving 3 cheers for the Prince. Leading the parade and giving 21-gun salute is HMAS Perth.
There's the crew lining the edge of the ship there, just about to give 3 cheers for Prince Philip, whom we just saw standing on the saluting bridge of HMAS Cook. And on HMAS Cook is a tremendous galaxy of gold braid and officialdom. The first Sea Lord of Great Britain, Admiral Sir William Staveley, Prime Minister Hawke and Mrs. Hawke. HMS Beaver.
There's the Beaver. She's carrying the flag of yet another Rear Admiral, Robin Hogg, who is the commander, 1st Flotillas of the Royal Navy.
How do you describe Beaver? What is she, a destroyer?
She is a Type 22 frigate. Designated by the Royal Navy as such. She carries Exocet missiles as well as harpoon missiles.
How old is she?
She's some 5 years old at this time.
The one coming up now is, I think, a New Zealand ship, the Southland.
The Southland is a destroyer escort, very similar to 5 Australian ships of the Parramatta class. And she's named for the most southern province in New Zealand. She was a somewhat older ship, transferred from the Royal Navy, and was given a very, very, very comprehensive briefing before she was handed to the New Zealanders.
How long ago was that, Alan?
That was some 2 or 3 years ago. Okay.
The action of the hats is all very heavily rehearsed. There's a certain lack of spontaneity about it, but it looks great. This, I think, is the Canadian ship Yukon.
Yes, the Yukon is one of 4 of a class which were designed in Canada and built in Canada in the 50s and early 60s.
It's an interesting shape. They're almost rounded like the deck of a submarine. Why is that?
Well, the Canadians, of course, operate in icy conditions, particularly around the northern frontiers. And the ship was designed for 2 reasons like that: to prevent the build-up of ice, and also to facilitate the washing off of nuclear contamination or biological and chemical contamination.
I see. They have black hats. No, they don't have white cap covers.
No, the Canadian forces, of course, are integrated as such, and they all wear the same uniform.
You mean Army, Navy and Air Force?
Yeah,
all the same?
Yes, they do. And they bear the same ranks. They don't have naval ranks such as we do.
HMS Illustrious in the background there. I think we'll come to that later on there. Now, this ship coming now is American USS Paul F. Foster.
The Paul F. Foster is a Spruance-class destroyer, somewhat heavier than we expect normally for a destroyer. She weighs almost as much as a World War II cruiser.
I was going to say she's a big one.
And today she's carrying the flag of Vice Admiral Paul F. McCarthy, who is the commander of the US 7th Fleet.
That's a big ship for a destroyer.
It is indeed. She carries Harpoon missiles, NATO Sea Sparrow air missile, 2 5-inch guns.
There's lots of odd-shaped boxes and...
Yes, the box you can see just after the gun on the forecastle is in fact the ASROC rocket, which is a...
ASROC?
ASROC anti-submarine rocket, which fires a depth charge some thousands of yards, rocket propelled.
This, I think, is the...
Commandant Blaison.
Commandant Blaison, the French ship, yes.
She's a corvette, quite a small ship, but she's quite capable. She carries the Exocet missile, 2 in number. She has a 4-inch gun and a rocket launcher similar to the Spruance class, in fact, for firing depth charges at a distance.
So that is the 6th nation. We've had Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America, and France, and now we have only Papua New Guinea, the Aitape.
Now, this is one of the smallest ships in the fleet. Aitape is an attack-class patrol boat, which were the predecessors of the present patrol boat serving the RAN. The Aitape has always been attached to PNG and has always had PNG personnel serving on board.
So there's Cook on your screens, seeing the last of the 7-nation ships sail by.
Now, for the first time in Australian waters, the massive British aircraft carrier HMS Illustrious. Her sister ship, Invincible, the much publicised warrior of the Falklands War, was to have been Australia's replacement for HMAS Melbourne. The current Illustrious is the 5th to bear this name. Her illustrious predecessor became one of the most distinguished aircraft carriers in the Second World War. And in 1945, she made numerous visits to Sydney. The second of the big ships is the flagship of the United States 7th Fleet, the command vessel Blue Ridge. She's the most advanced command ship in the entire US Navy, and as flagship, usually carries the flag of Vice Admiral Paul McCarthy. Yes, we have there in front of us the legendary Mighty Mo, the USS Missouri, the biggest vessel and a centrepiece in this review. She's one of the most famous battleships of all time. Her place in history was assured on the 2nd of September 1945 in Tokyo, when on her decks the instrument of surrender was signed, ending the Second World War. That historic ceremony was carried around the world via radio and was conducted on board, whilst every anti-aircraft gun, and mind you, they were fully manned, pointed to the sky. She certainly is a very old ship. Alan, why did President Reagan recommission the Mighty Mo?
Well, the fact is, John, that her armour was very suitable in these days of anti-ship missiles. She's got 13.5-inch steel on the side. She's less vulnerable to air attack because of anti-aircraft defence systems, such as the Phalanx close-in weapon system.
Well, speaking of weapon systems, Let's take a look now at the tremendous firepower of Missouri during exercises off Sydney last Tuesday.
First, a quick display of her close-in weapon system, 20mm ammunition at 50 rounds a second. Then Missouri's 6 twin mounts hurled a few projectiles weighing 30 kilos, a casual 15 kilometres. And then, as I was saying, and then there is the 3 gun turrets that can lob an almost 2-ton armour-piercing bomb 40 kilometres. Want to see it again?
That's very impressive, isn't it?
And of course the other unbelievable thing about this monster, the mighty Mo, is that she carries 2.5 million gallons of fuel. Alan, how far would that take her?
Well, very roughly halfway around the world. I'm glad I'm not paying the bill for it.
And here we have the first of the small ships review, HMAS Flinders.
Why is she white? I mean, the Cook is white and that one is white. All the others are the typical navy grey. Why is she white? She's leading the small boats there, and they're all grey. What's the story?
The hydrographic and oceanographic research vessels, scientific ships in fact, are painted white by international convention, so that they are distinguishable from being a warship as such.
Ah, here comes the fly past of, I think these are the Orions, aren't they?
Yes, they're designated P3Cs by the Royal Australian Air Force, which operate them. They are anti-submarine patrol aircraft, in which case they are fitted with an array of detection equipment, sonar buoys and magnetic anomaly detectors.
We've certainly got a very, very unusual addition, I guess you could say, to this review. What is that?
It looks like some sort of amphibious jeep. I saw that fellow with a Volkswagen he was going to cross Bass Strait in, but that's quite different.
I think I saw the Duke pretending not to notice that. But what he certainly has noticed there is the HMAS Jervis Bay. Alan, as the fleet training ship, she's obviously got a very important behind-the-scenes role, if you like.
Yes, she is provided for seamanship and navigation training. Most navies have training ships. And Jervis Bay was bought in 1977. She was the old Australian trader. So she's got a roll-on, roll-on capability, roll-on, roll-off capability, I should say, which enables her to be used as a heavy lift ship for the Army as well, or indeed the Air Force if they need heavy lift.
Well, now there, I think we're safely saying we can spot the HMAS Otama submarine, another Oberon-class submarine destined for replacement in the 1990s. Well, there we have the HMS Amazon, and she is the same type of frigate as 2 that were lost during the Falklands conflict. Alan, that there obviously is a survivor, but a vessel which in recent times has had a pretty checkered history.
Well, she was... ships of that class were sunk in the Falklands War, there's no doubt of that. They were sunk not by Exocet, but by ordinary ordnance from Mirages and Skyhawks.
And there we have the official party, in the centre of which at this stage is the Prime Minister, Mr. Bob Hawke. On his left, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip. And they are about to receive the salute from the Manchester, the HMS Manchester, and she is the sister ship of the Sheffield, which was lost in the Falklands by an Exocet missile. Alan, at 22 years old, the destroyer escort, HMAS Derwent, is probably nearing the end of her active life. Would I be right in saying that?
Yes, she's a pretty old design now, and she's been well worked over. Normally you count on 20 years life for a warship. It becomes uneconomical to keep on modernising after that time.
There we have another wide shot of what's happening today on Sydney Harbour, and really we'll never see it again probably for decades. Now we're approaching, I would imagine, the HMAS Darwin. The HMAS Darwin is one of 4 currently in service, and Alan, I believe 2 are being built.
Yes, there are 2 more of this class being built at Williamstown Dockyard, and you're quite right, that is the Darwin. We can't really see it here properly from this angle, but the overhang of the stern to accommodate the bigger helicopters that are going to be supplied for those ships. And also it's got a Canadian design system for hauling down the aircraft when it lands. It's called the Recovery and Surface Transit System, or RAST system, which in fact the helicopter fires a harpoon, and it is gathered up on board and mechanically draws the helicopter down in and onto the deck safely while it's rolling and pitching, as you can imagine. And then after the engines stop, the rotors are folded and the helicopter goes via those hangar doors we saw into the hangars. There's the torpedo tubes, the anti-submarine torpedoes, by the way, we can just see there.
Certainly can. But I go back to my point, I think the unsung heroes are perhaps these chopper pilots who get out there and make sure that these magnificent vessels are sailing into, well, as safe a waters as possible. There's another great shot. Aren't they magnificent, though, really?
Yes, they're great ships. When they were originally designed, Admiral Zumwalt wanted them to be under $50 million. They're starting to get a bit heavy at over $400 million. It's an indication of what inflation has done.
I think he's waving to a few spectator craft there as much as some of
they're headed into Garden Island now. They're passing the Stalwart. I had the pleasure of commanding that ship for some time, and I must say it was most enjoyable. It's a magnificent ship. It's an Australian designed and built ship, and it has all sorts of workshops. It's a complement of something over 300. And it's got engineers and shipwrights and electricians and electronic people and workshops, and it can do almost anything.
We're on to Torrens, D-53. She's the same class as the Parramatta, is she not, Alan?
Yes, she is indeed, Stuart, but she does look somewhat different in as much that she was redesigned. The Swan and the Torrens were sister ships. They came later than the earlier 4, and they have a much sleeker look. They were redesigned by the Australian Naval Technical Services in Canberra.
And all named after Australian rivers, as is Parramatta, the third of the name, Parramatta. Specifically, I should say, ordered for the Commonwealth Navy was the first Parramatta, and this is, there's been one in between, and this is the current HMAS Parramatta. The crew are now saluting Duke of Edinburgh.
We're doing a rather rapid turn here in the basin at Garden Island, and here's the HMAS Canberra.
Canberra is there, FFG 02.
Well, now we're coming up to the HMAS Tobruk. Versatility is fast becoming the name of the game in navies throughout the world. Among the most versatile ships in Australia's Navy is HMAS Tobruk. Yes, Alan, a relatively new addition to the RAN and built practically locally. Well, Newcastle, in fact. A great job.
Yes, Carrington Slipways at Newcastle built the Tobruk, and they did a marvellous job. They built it on dry land, dug out a bit of the riverbank alongside, and then tipped it into the ditch. It was a most interesting form of construction and launching.
And basically, what is the Tobruk's functions?
Well, it's a heavy lift ship for the Army or the Air Force, and it, as we saw from that clip, it can put things ashore over beachheads without the need for a port.
OK, there, a magnificent shot of HMAS Hobart. Alan, being a guided missile destroyer and with the RAN for 20 years, no doubt the HMAS Hobart has been considerably active in that time.
Yes, she was the first of the guided missile destroyers to be sent to Vietnam very shortly after she commissioned. So she did more tours of Vietnam than probably any of the other DDGs. In fact, I was captain of her when the Vietnam deployments were cancelled. There you can see Ikara. See that blue and white missile there, just under the forward funnel?
Yes.
Just gone. So she's very well equipped with all sorts of equipment. The standard missile system, there's the Ikara again, you can just see it. It's a small aeroplane, in fact, which carries a torpedo, a homing torpedo, an anti-submarine torpedo. We're coming to the end of this version of the Cook going round, and we're coming on to the fly past.
And that should be great. I've been preparing for that, as we saw before.
And here comes the fleet air arm of several nations. Initially, I think the Sea Kings, is that right, Alan? From the Royal Australian Naval Fleet Air Arm.
Yes, indeed. Only followed by 5 Wessex of the RAN and 6 Squirrel French-built helicopters of the RAN also. And behind them should be the Royal Navy from HMS Illustrious.
And some from other navies as well, I believe.
Yes,
so
there will be an international
they're all coming right down the harbour, and we'll be saluting Prince Philip on board HMAS Cook, where we are, with the White Ensign there proudly being towed around. That's a big White Ensign underneath the helicopter.
There we have the official party peering through binoculars. Must be the aircraft are quite some distance off yet, I think. I'm trying to pick them up in the distance. Here they come. Those, as you can see, there are Wessex helicopters, the utility helicopters, and just below them and ahead are the Sea Kings.
Heading straight for the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge, which we hope they miss both, because we need them both.
I flew in Wessex helicopters in the 60s. They're a very fine aircraft, and they're still doing a very good job in the RAN.
Well, His Royal Highness should be very intrigued with this, because his second son, of course, is a helicopter pilot with the British Navy.
And I'm sure the Duke himself has flown probably a Wessex aircraft.
He's a qualified flyer, yes, he is.
Yes, he is, yes, and there are Wessex in the Queen's flight.
Areas from Illustrious are in there somewhere, or will be following. I'm not quite sure which yet. We can't quite spot them.
What a magnificent sight that is. Those wonderful ships and all those people around the foreshores. You hear them now going overhead.
Harriers, of course, can take off from the Illustrious while she's stationary in harbour, because they are jump jets. They can go straight up and create a hell of a noise for the neighbours over there in Clifton Gardens, in Mossman.
Is the Duke taking professional aviators' interest in what's going on up there?
Oh. And no doubt Mr. Hawke counting the cost of it all for the budget.
No doubt indeed. There come the Harriers. There they are there.
They're the jump jets which made such a name for themselves in Falkland off the Invincible. These, of course, are the Illustrious, which is moored just off Mossman and Clifton Gardens.
They put on a spectacular show yesterday afternoon during the rehearsal.
Yes, they took off from the deck, straight up over the bridge. The Harbour Bridge, of course, not the bridge of HMS Illustrious.
Just heard them pass over the Cook, and there they are, disappearing westward down the harbour.
And there goes the White Ensign coming back on the chopper, marking the end of the fly past. And very nearly the end of this magnificent naval review, which is not your first one, is it, Alan? You were in the Coronation Review in Britain?
Yes, indeed. I was in one of Her Majesty's submarines, the Scorcher, in 1952. And,
seconded from the Royal Australian Navy, I presume?
Yes, I was under training in England at the time.
It's a great shot of the bridge. It's one thing you didn't have at Spithead. In just a moment, HMS Geelong, which has been escorting the Cook around the harbour, will be making its steam past Cook to give its salute to the Duke of Edinburgh, and that will be the final salute. That is...
looks like Geelong.
Geelong, which has been our escorting vessel, is turning around to salute His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh on board HMS Cook. And Shortly after that, we'll be saying goodbye to the harbour.
You can see them now waving their caps.
No, that's all right.
That's a remarkable end to a piece of history for Australia, I guess. What is the history of naval reviews, Alan? Have you wound up on that?
They date back to the very early of the 15th century. And the first recorded Royal Review took place in 1415, when King Henry IV reviewed it.
Ceremonial?
Yes, and one of the great reviews, of course, was the Diamond Jubilee of Queen Victoria, which was held in 1887, when 150 warships were lined up in the Spithead.
I can remember the one just before World War II broke out. I wasn't yet in the Navy, but I was a kid listening to it on the radio, no television then, and it was very impressive. Miles and miles of great big ironclad battleships. But this has been a remarkable one today, I must say. It's 7 different fleets, presumably invited by our government as our guests on the harbour, and I'm delighted to see that for the most part they've been treated as welcome guests.
And it's been a magnificent day. You, as a Commodore, and having more than 30 years, I won't say exactly how many in the Royal Australian Navy, this, to you personally, must be a tremendous occasion.
I think it is quite the finest occasion I've seen in Australia, and I can only hope that it is a great forerunner for the 1988 bicentennial.
With a fanfare of musically orchestrated fireworks and the New South Wales salute to the RAN, the evening's display provided the perfect, spectacular ending to a day, in fact a week, we'll never forget. Again, thousands of spectators lined the foreshores of Sydney Harbour to witness and to be a part of the excitement and history in the making. The Navy hadn't let us down so far, and their set-piece fireworks display they promised us turned out to be another bonus. A carpet of 200 silver rockets were fired simultaneously from the fleet of Navy ships, along with a gun salute and smoke flares. And it was barges strategically located around the inner harbour that fired off a myriad of shells bursting into sparkling showers of colour. One of the display organisers described this as the largest set piece of cracker extravaganza ever performed in Australia. Altogether, 2,500 firework shells delighted the onlookers and literally set the harbour alight. It all cost well in excess of $100,000. So much to go up, yet for such a great occasion. The orchestration accompanying the exploding fireworks certainly added another stunning dimension to the display. Many of the sailors visiting Sydney for the celebration had some of the best views of the display from the warships stationed in the harbour. They too will never forget this. And hundreds of private vessels also took up vantage points in the area. And of course, the sponsor of the night's display, Swan Premium Lager, wasn't to be outdone. This was to be Niagara on the Bridge, a highlight providing a brilliant waterfall effect over the harbour bridge. Tonight, Sydney said thank you to the 6 visiting nations for helping us celebrate our Navy's wonderful 75th anniversary.